Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we like to really get into the weeds on some interesting topics.
That's right.
We get a little nerdy with it sometimes, but
We go deep.
we go deep. Exactly.
Yeah.
And today is no exception. We're diving headfirst into the world of conspiracy theories.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, I know, right?
Buckle up.
It's going to be a wild ride. And we've got a whole stack of sources to work with this time. Books about the Illuminati, whispers of a new world order,
Right.
even a guide to rune magic. So we've got a lot to unpack.
It's a fascinating mix. It really is. You know, we've got this blend of history and modern anxieties, and it's really interesting to see how they all connect.
Yeah, and our mission here, as always, is to explore these sources to see what they have to say without endorsing any particular viewpoint.
Yeah.
We're just your guides through this labyrinth of ideas.
Exactly. We're here to lay it all out and let you decide what you think.
So let's jump right in. And I think there's no better place to start than with a group that's practically synonymous with conspiracy theories, the Illuminati.
Yeah, they're the classic conspiracy group.
Right. Like if you say conspiracy theory, most people immediately think of the Illuminati.
And the term itself has been around for centuries. Memoirs illustrating the history of Jacobinism. This book we have here mentions that even back in the 18th century, the Illuminati were already associated with all these plots against religion and the monarchy.
So they've had a long time to build up their reputation.
Exactly.
And it gets even more interesting when you look at some of these other sources. We have Bloodlines of the Illuminati, deeper insights into the Illuminati formula, final warning, a history of the New World Order, and even Illuminati, the cult that hijacked the world. They all paint this picture of the Illuminati as this super powerful secret organization with a seriously sinister agenda.
Like straight out of a spy movie.
Right.
But with global domination as the goal.
Yeah. They're not just messing around.
No, they're not. They talk about how the Illuminati are pulling the strings behind the scenes, manipulating financial systems, controlling the media and education, even using mind control to turn people into...
Wait, mind control?
Yeah, that's what one of the sources calls it, human robots.
Oh, okay. That's a little creepy.
It is. And it gets pretty detailed. Final Warning, for example, claims that the Illuminati are behind major historical events like the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, the assassination of JFK, even the Pearl Harbor attack.
So they're saying the Illuminati have been around for a while.
Oh yeah, centuries, according to some of these sources. They've been playing the long game.
Wow. But before we get too carried away, I think it's important to point out that these are some pretty wild claims.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking about highly controversial theories here with no mainstream acceptance.
Right. But I think it's still interesting to see how these sources connect the dots and build their case.
Oh, definitely. It's like a puzzle they're trying to solve.
Exactly. And they see the Illuminati's fingerprints everywhere. They even point to organizations like the Council on Foreign Relations and the United Nations as possible fronts for their activities.
Right. Like these seemingly legitimate groups are just pawns in the Illuminati's grand scheme.
Yeah, it's pretty mind-blowing.
It is. And it all ties into this idea of the New World Order, which is basically a modern take on the Illuminati theories.
So what's the New World Order all about?
Well, the core belief here is that a small group of elites are working to establish a totalitarian world government.
So basically world domination.
Pretty much. And they often point to things like globalization and international cooperation as tools that the elites are using to achieve their goals.
So the Illuminati are the puppet masters, and the New World Order is their grand plan.
That's the basic idea. And one of the most disturbing aspects of this whole theory is the idea of mind control, specifically something called Monarch programming.
Monarch programming.
Yeah, it's a recurring theme in both deeper insights into the Illuminati formula and Illuminati PDF Drive 3.
Okay, this is where things start to get a little dark.
Yeah, a little bit. We're talking about alleged trauma-based mind control, where victims are subjected to horrific abuse to basically fracture their personalities.
That's awful. Why would they do that?
Yeah. Well, the idea is that by creating these fragmented personalities, they can then program these different alter egos to carry out specific tasks.
Like mind-controlled assassins or something?
It sounds like something out of a movie, but that's the kind of stuff they're suggesting.
So how would they even do this? How would they program someone's mind like that?
Well, according to these sources, they use all sorts of techniques. Electroshock drugs, hypnosis, anything to basically break down the victim's mind and then rebuild it the way they want it.
That's terrifying. And where is this supposed to be happening?
Well, Illuminati, PDF Drive 3, actually names a specific location, China Lake, California, as a primary site for these alleged programs.
Really?
Yeah. It gets pretty specific. But again, it's important to remember that this whole idea of monarch programming is highly debated, and there's really no widely accepted evidence to support it.
Right. It's just one of those things that keeps popping up in these conspiracy theories.
Exactly. It's a recurring theme. And it gets even creepier when they start talking about how they use specific colors, symbols, even movies like The Wizard of Oz and Alice in Wonderland, to trigger and control these so-called altars.
Seriously, like something straight out of a psychological thriller.
Right. It's all very mysterious and intriguing.
So it's not just about controlling governments and financial systems. They're trying to control people's minds, too.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
And to make things even weirder, they also talk about the role of symbolism and occult practices in all of this.
Symbolism and occult practices.
Yeah. Like they think these symbols and rituals hold hidden meanings and power.
So it's not just about practical things like money and power. There's a spiritual element to it, too.
Exactly. They're drawing on all sorts of ideas, from ancient mysticism to modern conspiracy theories.
It's like a giant melting pot of weirdness.
You could say that, but it's all fascinating stuff. It really makes you think about how people see the world and how they interpret events.
Okay, but before we get too deep into the occult and all that, I think we need to address something important that we've been seeing in some of these sources.
What's that?
Well, a few of them contain some pretty disturbing anti-Semitic ideas.
Oh, yeah, that's right. They tried to link Jewish individuals and organizations to various conspiracies.
Right. They mention things like the Rothschild family, the protocols of the Elders of Zion, and accuse Jewish people of controlling financial systems.
It's important to be very clear here that those are baseless and harmful stereotypes rooted in prejudice.
We absolutely do not endorse these views.
Not at all. We're simply presenting what's in the sources without endorsing their viewpoints.
Exactly. Our goal is to give you a balanced perspective so you can form your own informed opinion.
That's right. We're just the messengers.
So let's move on to something a little less controversial, but equally important: critical thinking.
Ah, yes, the cornerstone of any good deep dive.
Exactly, because these theories can be captivating and intriguing, but it's crucial to evaluate them with a healthy dose of skepticism.
Absolutely. We need to remember that just because two things happen at the same time or in a certain order doesn't mean one caused the other.
Right. Correlation doesn't equal causation.
Exactly.
It's easy to get caught up in the mystery and intrigue, but we need to be careful not to blindly accept everything we hear.
So how do we avoid falling into that trap? How do we approach these theories with a critical eye?
Well, that's what we're going to explore next.
Let's do it.
We're going to dive into some practical tips for evaluating conspiracy theories and for separating fact from fiction.
Sounds good.
So stay tuned. So we've been talking about critical thinking and how important it is when we're dealing with conspiracy theories.
It's really the key, isn't it?
Yeah, because it's so easy to get swept up in the intrigue and the mystery.
Right. You start seeing connections everywhere.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And before you know it, you're down the rabbit hole.
So how do we stay grounded? How do we
Yeah.
make sure we're not just blindly accepting everything we hear?
Well, I think the first step is to remember that every source has a perspective.
Right. They're coming at this from a certain angle with certain biases and assumptions.
Exactly. So we need to be aware of that perspective and take it into account when we're evaluating the information.
It's like comparing different eyewitness accounts of the same event.
Right. They might all have seen the same thing, but they're going to describe it differently based on their own point of view.
Exactly. And that's where critical thinking comes in. We need to be able to compare and contrast these different perspectives, analyze the evidence, and come to our own conclusions.
So it's not just about accepting or rejecting a theory outright.
No, it's about understanding the nuances, the different interpretations, and the potential biases.
And I think a good example of this is how the different sources we've looked at approach the Illuminati.
Right, like Bloodlines of the Illuminati is all about these powerful families.
The Rothschilds, the Rockefellers.
Exactly. They make it sound like being born into the right bloodline automatically makes you an Illuminati puppet master.
Like it's some kind of inherited power.
Right. But then you look at deeper insights into the Illuminati formula, and they take a completely different approach.
They're more interested in the methods of control. The idea that these alleged Illuminati figures use mind control and manipulation to create their own power players.
Right. Like they're not just born into it, they're groomed for it.
Exactly. And they even suggest that things like classic Disney films were somehow used as programming tools for this mind control.
Which is a pretty wild idea.
Yeah, it is. But it just goes to show how different sources, even when they're talking about the same basic conspiracy, can have vastly different interpretations.
And it's our job as critical thinkers to sort through those interpretations and figure out what makes sense.
So how do we do that? How do we evaluate these different sources and figure out which ones are more credible?
Well, I think a good place to start is by looking at the evidence.
Right. What kind of proof are they offering to support their claims?
Exactly.
Hmm.
Are they relying on verifiable facts, historical documents, eyewitness accounts? Or is it mostly speculation, hearsay, and conjecture?
And I think it's also important to look at the source itself.
Right. Who are they? What are their credentials? What's their motivation for putting out this information?
Exactly. Are they a respected historian? A journalist with a track record of accuracy? Or are they some random person on the internet with an axe to grind?
And it's not always easy to tell.
No, it's not. That's why critical thinking is so important. It's about being skeptical, questioning everything, and doing your own research.
It's about being a detective, basically.
Exactly. And speaking of detectives, let's apply our detective skills to another popular conspiracy theory, the New World Order.
Okay, let's see what we've got.
So, final warning. A history of the New World Order presents a very structured, almost bureaucratic view of this theory.
Right, like it's all part of some grand master plan.
Exactly. And they point to historical events and organizations like the UN as evidence that we're slowly but surely heading towards a one-world government.
Okay, so that's one perspective.
Right. But then you have Illuminati the cult that hijacked the world, which takes a much more dramatic approach.
Dramatic.
Well, they claim that the New World Order is actually a front for satanic forces trying to take over the world.
Oh, wow. That's a bit of a leap.
Yeah, it is. And to make things even more concerning, they cite the protocols of the Elders of Zion as proof of this satanic agenda.
And that's a huge red flag.
It is, because the protocols are a known forgery, a fabricated document created to spread anti-Semitism.
So any source that uses them as evidence immediately loses credibility in my book.
Absolutely. It's a clear sign that they're not doing their due diligence and that they're probably more interested in pushing an agenda than in presenting the truth.
Right. It's a reminder that we can't just blindly trust any source that claims to have all the answers.
We have to be skeptical, question everything, and look for the evidence ourselves.
Exactly. And I think that's especially important when we're dealing with something as complex and controversial as the New World Order.
Because there are legitimate concerns about things like globalization, the concentration of power, and the erosion of national sovereignty.
Those are real issues that we need to be talking about.
But we need to be able to separate those legitimate concerns from the more outlandish claims of shadowy cabals and satanic conspiracies.
And that's not always easy.
No, it's not. But that's where critical thinking comes in. It's about being able to discern fact from fiction, evidence from speculation.
It's about being able to see through the smoke and mirrors and get to the heart of the matter.
And I think one way to do that is to ask ourselves some simple questions when we're evaluating these theories.
Like what?
Well, first, who benefits from this theory? Who's pushing it, and what do they stand to gain?
That's a good one. Because sometimes the answer to that question can reveal a lot about the motivations behind the theory.
Exactly. And then second, what evidence is there to actually support this theory? Are there any verifiable facts, or is it mostly speculation and conjecture?
Right, because a good theory should be based on evidence, not just wishful thinking.
And finally, does this theory hold up under scrutiny? If we apply a little bit of logic and common sense, does it still make sense?
Those are all great questions. And I think if we can ask those questions and answer them honestly, then we're well on our way to being more critical thinkers.
And that's really the goal here, isn't it?
It is. We want to empower people to think for themselves, to question the information they're being given, and to come to their own conclusions.
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, the truth is out there.
But it's up to us to find it.
And that's what the deep dive is all about.
Let's keep digging.
Okay, so we've talked about the Illuminati, the New World Order, and the importance of critical thinking. But there's one more area I want to explore before we wrap up this episode.
What's that?
Well, I'm really intrigued by this whole idea of rune magic and the role of the occult in these conspiracy theories.
Yeah, that's a fascinating angle, isn't it?
It is. It's like they're suggesting that these conspiracy theorists are using magic to achieve their goals.
Or at least that they believe in the power of these ancient symbols and rituals.
Right. And I think it's important to understand that perspective, even if we don't necessarily agree with it.
Absolutely. Because it gives us a glimpse into their worldview and their motivations.
So let's take a closer look at rune magic and see what we can learn.
Okay, sounds good. So we've been wading through all these conspiracy theories, looking at the Illuminati, the New World Order.
Right, and trying to apply that critical thinking lens to everything.
Exactly. It's like detective work.
It is. It's all about piecing together the clues, looking for patterns, and trying to make sense of it all.
And it's amazing how even when different sources are talking about the same basic conspiracy, they can have wildly different interpretations.
Like with the Illuminati, for example. Bloodlines of the Illuminati really focuses on those powerful families.
Right? They make it seem like it's all about who you're related to.
Yeah, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, like it's some kind of secret society based on bloodlines.
But then deeper insights into the Illuminati formula takes a totally different approach.
Right, they're more interested in the methods of control, how these alleged Illuminati figures manipulate and influence people to get what they want.
Like they're not just born into power, they actively cultivate it.
And they even suggest that classic Disney films were somehow used as programming tools for this mind control.
Which is a pretty wild idea.
It is, but it just goes to show how diverse these conspiracy theories can be.
And how important it is to compare and contrast different sources.
Exactly, because one source might emphasize one aspect while another source focuses on something completely different.
And it's up to us to piece it all together.
Right, to look at the big picture and try to see the forest for the trees.
So let's shift gears a bit and talk about the New World Order.
Okay, so Final Warning presents this very structured, almost bureaucratic view of the New World Order.
Like it's all laid out in some secret document.
Right, with timelines and agendas and all that.
And they point to things like the UN and other international organizations as evidence that this plan is already in motion.
Like we're slowly but surely heading towards a one-world government.
But then Illuminati, the cult that hijacked the world, goes in a totally different direction.
Right, they claim that the New World Order is actually a cover for a satanic takeover of the world.
And they even use the protocols of the Elders of Zion as evidence.
Which, as we've discussed before, is a huge red flag.
It is, because the protocols are a known forgery, a fabricated document designed to spread anti-Semitism.
So any source that uses them as evidence immediately loses credibility in my book.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a sign that they're not being careful with their research, or that they might even have a hidden agenda of their own.
So it's a good reminder that we can't just blindly trust any source that claims to have all the answers.
Right. We have to be critical thinkers, we have to do our own research, and we have to be willing to challenge the information we're being given.
Okay, so we've talked about the Illuminati, the New World Order, and the importance of critical thinking. But before we wrap up, I want to touch on one more thing.
What's that?
Well, we've seen some pretty troubling examples of anti-Semitism in some of these sources.
Yeah, it's important to address that.
It is, because these harmful stereotypes and conspiracy theories can have real-world consequences.
They can lead to discrimination, violence, even genocide.
And we have to be vigilant about calling out these harmful ideas whenever we see them.
Absolutely. We can't just ignore them or pretend they don't exist.
So how do we combat these harmful narratives?
Well, I think education is key. We need to teach people about the history of anti-Semitism and how these harmful stereotypes have been used to justify discrimination and violence.
And we need to promote critical thinking skills so that people can recognize these harmful ideas and reject them.
Exactly. We need to empower people to think for themselves and to challenge the information they're being given.
Okay, so to wrap things up, I think it's clear that conspiracy theories are a complex and fascinating topic.
They are. They can be entertaining, thought-provoking, even disturbing at times.
But I think the most important thing is to approach them with a critical and discerning mind.
Exactly. Don't just believe everything you hear. Do your own research and come to your own conclusions.
And remember, there's a difference between healthy skepticism and blind cynicism.
Right? It's okay to question things, to challenge authority, to look for alternative explanations.
But we also need to be grounded in reality and be careful not to fall down the rabbit hole of paranoia and delusion.
So stay curious, stay engaged, but stay grounded.
Exactly. And that's a good reminder for all of us, I think.
It is, because at the end of the day, the truth is out there, but it's up to us to find it.
Well said. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the world of conspiracy theories.
I hope you enjoyed the ride.
I know I did. And we hope you learned something along the way.
If you did, be sure to like and subscribe to the deep dive for more fascinating explorations of complex topics.
And don't forget to leave us a comment and let us know what you think.
We love hearing from our listeners.
So until next time, stay curious and keep digging.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.